What would happen if all of humanity shared a single language? Imagine a world where every person could understand one another instantly, where translation was unnecessary and misunderstandings caused by cultural differences simply disappeared. In such a world, nations might also operate under a single political system, with major decisions coordinated from a unified global center. Cultural traditions could gradually merge into one shared identity, and technology would function as the central infrastructure connecting every aspect of human life. Education, commerce, communication, and even public opinion could operate within one interconnected system. At first glance, this vision might seem like the highest achievement of civilization. A unified humanity could cooperate more efficiently, resolve conflicts more quickly, and accelerate scientific and technological progress beyond anything previously imagined. If barriers of language, geography, and culture disappeared, humanity might appear to move toward a new era of peace and coordination. Yet beneath this appealing image lies a deeper question. Would such a unified world truly represent the pinnacle of human progress? Or could it conceal a danger humanity has never fully encountered before? When all systems become centralized and all people move within the same structure, the very forces that create stability could also create unprecedented control. In the modern era, the dream of global unity is no longer an abstract idea. We are already living in a world where many of these elements are beginning to exist. The global internet has connected nearly the entire planet. Information now travels across continents within seconds. A conversation in one part of the world can instantly influence millions of people elsewhere. News, ideas, and cultural trends circulate through digital networks at a pace that would have been unimaginable only a few decades ago. Alongside this technological transformation, a global economy has emerged. Supply chains stretch across continents, financial markets are interconnected, and economic decisions made in one country can have immediate consequences for millions of people in distant regions. Entire industries now depend on international coordination, making the world increasingly interdependent. Social media has intensified this phenomenon even further. Billions of people now participate in shared digital spaces where opinions, narratives, and emotions spread rapidly across borders. A trend that begins in one city can become global within hours. Cultural influences no longer move slowly through generations. They move instantly through networks of screens and algorithms. At the same time, new technological developments, particularly artificial intelligence and centralized data systems, are introducing an entirely new dimension to global coordination. Massive databases can collect information about behavior, preferences, and patterns on a scale never before seen in history. Artificial intelligence systems can analyze that information, influence decisions, and even shape the flow of knowledge and communication. Taken together, these developments are gradually bringing humanity closer to the concept of a globally unified system. Not through visible walls or empires, but through invisible networks of information, technology, and centralized influence. The desire for coordination, efficiency, and global governance is becoming one of the defining ideas of the modern age. Yet the most fascinating aspect of this dream is that it is not new at all. Thousands of years ago, an ancient story described a remarkably similar ambition. The story appears in the Bible and is known as the account of the Tower of Babel. which took place on the plain of Shinar. According to the narrative, after humanity survived the Great Flood, people gathered together in one region and began constructing a massive city and an enormous tower. Their intention was not merely to create an impressive building. They wanted to construct a symbol of their unity and power, something so grand that it would reach toward the heavens. But when we examine the story carefully, it becomes clear that the Tower of Babel is not simply an ancient tale about an unfinished structure. It reveals a recurring psychological and social pattern within human history. The desire to centralize power, unify thought, and organize humanity into a single system where everyone moves in the same direction. In this sense, Babel is far more than a historical curiosity. It represents a model of what can happen when humanity attempts to construct a perfectly unified civilization. It raises questions that remain deeply relevant today. What happens when diversity disappears? What happens when all people operate within the same structure of authority and thought? The story of Babel suggests that the pursuit of absolute unity may carry consequences that reach far beyond architecture or politics. It touches the very nature of human freedom, identity, and spiritual responsibility. To understand the deeper meaning of Babel, it is important to consider the historical and theological context in which the story unfolds. After the Great Flood, according to the biblical account, humanity received a clear command: spread across the earth and multiply. This instruction was not merely about population growth. It carried a deeper purpose. By spreading across the world, humanity would develop diverse communities, cultures, and perspectives. Different environments would shape different ways of life. Languages would evolve, traditions would form, and societies would grow with their own identities. Diversity was not an accident of history. It was part of the design for human civilization. Yet humanity chose a different path. Instead of spreading out across the earth, people gathered together on the wide and fertile plain of Shinar. There they decided to build a city and an enormous tower. Their declaration reveals the intention behind their project. Let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top reaches to the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered across the face of the earth. This statement exposes the true motivation behind Babel. The people did not want to disperse. They did not want to live in separate communities, shaped by different environments and traditions. Instead, they wanted to remain together and create a single center of power and identity. In many interpretations of the story, a powerful figure stands behind this vision: Nimrod. He is often described as one of the first great rulers after the flood, a leader associated with the founding of early cities and kingdoms. Over time, Nimrod became a symbolic representation of centralized authority and human ambition. Under the leadership of such a figure, the project at Shinar would have been far more than a construction effort. It would have been an attempt to organize human society around a single center of power. The city would function as a hub of political and social control, while the tower would serve as a visible symbol of unity and dominance. The Tower of Babel, therefore, represents much more than a physical structure. It embodies a vision for a new kind of civilization. In this vision, humanity would no longer exist as scattered communities with independent traditions and perspectives. Instead, people would become participants in a single organized system. the tower would stand as a monument to that system, a declaration that humanity had achieved unity through its own effort and ambition. It would signal the emergence of a centralized civilization where identity, purpose, and direction flowed from one shared structure. But the deeper significance of Babel lies not only in its architecture. The project also implied a profound transformation in how people thought and lived. When everyone speaks the same language, pursues the same goals, and operates within the same political structure, individuality begins to fade. Differences in worldview and perspective gradually disappear. In other words, Babel was not merely a building project. It was a psychological and social experiment designed to reshape human civilization. The tower represented an effort to create uniformity, not only in speech but in thought, purpose, and collective ambition. If successful, such a system could have produced a civilization where human identity was defined by its participation in a single collective structure. Personal perspectives and local traditions might gradually be replaced by a shared ideology that bound everyone together. Seen from this perspective, Babel may represent the earliest attempt in human history to construct a completely unified civilization. It was a vision of a world where diversity was minimized, authority was centralized, and humanity functioned as one organized entity. And it is precisely at this moment that the deeper question emerges. When humanity seeks to create absolute unity, what must be sacrificed in order to achieve it? If the project at Shinar was truly an attempt to create a unified civilization, one of its most powerful foundations was the existence of a single shared language. At first glance, this seems entirely beneficial. A common language allows people to communicate easily. It eliminates misunderstandings and removes the barriers that often slow cooperation between different groups. When everyone speaks the same language, ideas move faster, instructions become clearer, and large projects can be organized with remarkable efficiency. From a practical perspective, a unified language appears to be a tremendous advantage. It enables rapid collaboration, coordinated labor, and streamlined planning. Massive construction projects, like the tower itself, become possible because workers, architects, and leaders can all understand one another instantly. In a society like Babel, where thousands of people were working together toward a single goal, such unity of communication would have been a powerful tool. Yet the same feature that creates efficiency can also create vulnerability. A single language does more than allow communication. It also shapes how people think. Language is not merely a collection of sounds or symbols used to exchange information. It forms the structure through which humans interpret reality. Words define concepts. Grammar organizes relationships between ideas. Over time, language becomes the framework within which people understand the world. Because of this, when an entire civilization operates within a single language, it often begins to share a similar mental structure. The categories used to describe reality become uniform. The metaphors that shape imagination become standardized. Even the way problems are framed begins to follow the same patterns. In a diverse world of many languages, this uniformity rarely occurs. Different cultures develop different expressions, different ways of describing time, responsibility, identity, and truth. Some languages emphasize relationships between people, while others emphasize action or hierarchy. These subtle differences influence how entire societies approach moral decisions, political organization, and philosophical questions. But when only one language dominates, the range of possible perspectives can gradually narrow. Ideas that fall outside the accepted vocabulary become harder to express. Concepts that do not fit within the dominant linguistic structure may slowly disappear from public thought. This is where the danger of a unified language emerges. What begins as a tool for cooperation can become a mechanism for intellectual conformity. If everyone uses the same words and the same conceptual framework, the diversity of thought that naturally arises in separate cultures can begin to fade. The loss of linguistic diversity often leads to the loss of intellectual diversity. When people think in similar patterns, they are less likely to challenge assumptions or question prevailing ideas. Critical debate becomes weaker because alternative perspectives are harder to articulate. Creativity can diminish because innovation often emerges from the collision of different ways of thinking. Even more concerning is the possibility that language itself can become a tool of power. In a centralized system, those who control institutions often influence the vocabulary used by society. Words can be redefined. Certain expressions can be discouraged or removed from public discourse. New terminology can be introduced to frame political or social ideas in particular ways. History has repeatedly shown how language can be shaped by authority. Governments, institutions, and dominant cultural forces frequently redefine concepts to align with their objectives. When this happens, language no longer simply reflects reality. It begins to guide how reality is perceived. In a society with many languages and independent cultural centers, such control is difficult to maintain. Competing traditions preserve alternative ways of thinking. But in a unified civilization like Babel, where everyone speaks the same language and operates within the same system, the potential for centralized influence becomes far greater. Vocabulary can be managed, definitions can shift. Over time, entire populations may adopt new interpretations of familiar concepts without realizing how their thinking has been guided. Thus, the unity of language that made Babel possible also carried within it the seeds of intellectual confinement. What appeared to be a tool of cooperation could quietly become a prison for the human mind. Another revealing detail in the Babel narrative appears in a small but significant technological note. The biblical account emphasizes that the builders used baked bricks instead of stone. At first glance, this might seem like an unimportant construction detail, but it actually reveals something profound about the nature of the society they were building. Stone structures depend on natural materials that must be gathered and shaped individually. Each stone is unique, and building with stone often requires careful craftsmanship. Brick, however, represents something different. Bricks can be manufactured in large quantities, identical in shape and size, produced through controlled processes rather than found in nature. In other words, the use of baked bricks symbolizes the emergence of early industrial thinking. It reflects a shift toward mass production, standardization, and efficiency. Instead of relying on irregular natural materials, the builders created uniform units that could be stacked quickly and predictably. This seemingly simple technological decision transformed the scale of what could be built. Standardized bricks allowed massive construction projects to move forward at unprecedented speed. Workers could organize themselves in predictable patterns, laying brick upon brick with mechanical precision. In this sense, the Society of Babel may represent one of the earliest examples of a highly organized system of production. Labor could be optimized, tasks could be divided, construction could be accelerated through coordination and repetition. From a logistical standpoint, this kind of system is extremely effective. Large populations can work together efficiently. Complex structures can be completed faster. Resources can be managed in ways that maximize productivity. Yet systems built around efficiency often carry a hidden cost. When processes are optimized for output and uniformity, individuals may gradually become less visible within the system itself. Workers become interchangeable units within a larger mechanism. Their personal identity matters less than the role they perform. In a massive project like the construction of Babel, the focus would naturally shift toward the completion of the tower. The success of the system would be measured by progress, speed, and structural achievement. The tower itself would become the ultimate symbol of accomplishment. But when a society organizes itself primarily around productivity and centralized goals, a subtle transformation can occur. Human beings begin to resemble the bricks they produce, standardized components designed to fit into a larger structure. The value of the individual may gradually be replaced by the value of their contribution to the system. Instead of asking who a person is, the system asks what function they perform. Identity becomes secondary to efficiency. This is one of the deeper symbolic warnings embedded in the Babel narrative. A civilization capable of organizing massive collective effort can achieve impressive physical results. Towers can rise, cities can expand, technology can advance. Yet if such a civilization also demands intellectual and cultural uniformity, the consequences reach far beyond architecture. When everyone thinks the same way, disagreement disappears. Without disagreement, there is no meaningful debate. Without debate, there is little opportunity for self-reflection. Intellectual friction, the clash of different perspectives, is one of the most important forces behind moral growth. When ideas collide, people are forced to examine their assumptions, reconsider their beliefs, and refine their understanding of truth. But in a perfectly unified system, this friction may vanish. Consensus replaces dialogue. Compliance replaces reflection. The collective vision of the system becomes so dominant that individuals rarely pause to question its direction. Ironically, the very unity that enables great achievements can also weaken the inner life of a civilization. Without diversity of thought and perspective, societies may become extraordinarily powerful while simultaneously losing the capacity for moral self-examination. In this way, the story of Babel presents not only a narrative about human ambition, but also a warning about the dangers of excessive uniformity. A system that values efficiency above individuality may construct impressive monuments, yet risk overlooking the deeper value of the human soul. At the height of humanity's unified ambition in Shinar, the biblical narrative introduces one of the most dramatic turning points in early human history. As the tower rose higher and the city expanded, the project appeared unstoppable. The people were organized, motivated, and united by a common language and a shared vision. From their perspective, they were building something extraordinary, a civilization that would stand as proof of human power and ingenuity. Yet the biblical account describes an unexpected response. God observes the project and recognizes something deeper than the construction itself. The issue is not the bricks, the tower, or the engineering. The concern lies in the trajectory of the human heart. A civilization perfectly united in ambition, but disconnected from humility, could move toward dangerous extremes. In response, God intervenes by confusing the language of the people, causing them to no longer understand one another. As communication breaks down, the massive construction effort collapses. Workers cannot coordinate their actions. Plans cannot be communicated clearly. The unified system that once drove the project forward suddenly fragments. At first glance, this intervention might appear to be a punishment directed at human innovation. It could seem like an act of divine opposition to human progress. But when viewed more carefully, the event reveals something far more profound. Rather than being an act of retaliation, the confusion of languages can be understood as an act of radical mercy. If the Babel system had reached completion, humanity might have locked itself into a single centralized structure of power and thought. With every person functioning inside the same ideological framework, there would have been little space for dissent, self-reflection, or moral independence. The very unity that allowed the tower to rise might have prevented individuals from questioning the direction of the civilization they were building. By breaking the linguistic unity of the people, God effectively disrupted the momentum of a system that could have absorbed the entire human race into a single collective identity. The collapse of communication forced humanity to disperse, forming separate cultures and societies across the earth. In this sense, the scattering of people was not merely a disruption of a building project, it was the preservation of human freedom. The fragmentation of language created space for individuals and communities to develop distinct identities. It restored the possibility of personal responsibility and independent thought. Most importantly, it allowed the human soul to breathe again outside the pressure of a single collective will. When everyone is swept along by the same ambition, individual conscience can easily be silenced. But when communities become separate and diverse, individuals regain the opportunity to reflect, question, and seek truth in ways that are not dictated by a single centralized authority. The destruction of the Babel system therefore represents more than the collapse of a tower. It symbolizes the breaking of a collective ego, a moment when humanity was prevented from losing its spiritual autonomy within a single unified structure. After Babel, the world changed dramatically. Instead of a single unified civilization centered in Shinar, humanity gradually spread across continents and landscapes. Mountains, deserts, rivers, and oceans separated communities from one another. Languages evolved independently, and cultures began to develop in unique ways. At first glance, this fragmentation might appear chaotic or inefficient. Separate nations often struggle to understand each other. Cultural differences can lead to conflict. Economic and political systems diverge in ways that make global cooperation difficult. Yet beneath these challenges lies an important protective function. Cultural and geographic boundaries slow the spread of ideas, both good and bad. When corruption or destructive ideologies arise in one society, they do not instantly engulf the entire human population. Other cultures can observe, resist, or respond differently. In this way, diversity acts as a natural safeguard within human civilization. Separate traditions provide alternative moral frameworks and different interpretations of justice, responsibility, and truth. These differences create a kind of global balance that prevents any single system from dominating the entire human story. The scattering of humanity also reinforces the deeply personal nature of moral transformation. True repentance, for example, is never a collective mechanical process. It is an individual encounter with truth that occurs within the conscience of a person. When individuals are submerged within a powerful collective identity, personal responsibility can easily disappear. People may simply follow the direction of the crowd, assuming that the group's momentum justifies its actions. But when societies are diverse and decentralized, individuals are more likely to confront moral questions on their own terms. They must decide what they believe rather than merely absorbing the beliefs of a centralized system. The existence of multiple nations therefore creates a form of global checks and balances. Different societies experiment with different ideas, and their successes or failures become lessons for others. No single authority controls the direction of all human development. While this decentralized world may appear messy and unpredictable, it preserves something essential: the freedom for humanity to explore truth from many perspectives. It allows moral reflection to occur within thousands of communities rather than being dictated by a single system of power. When viewed through the lens of modern history, the story of Babel feels surprisingly relevant. The technological networks of the 21st century are once again bringing humanity closer to the idea of a unified global system. Artificial intelligence, centralized data infrastructures, and emerging forms of digital governance are increasingly capable of coordinating behavior on a planetary scale. Some observers even envision future systems where global institutions regulate artificial intelligence, manage digital identities, and oversee economic activity through unified technological platforms. Concepts such as centralized AI governance or digital reputation systems, sometimes compared to forms of social credit, suggest the possibility of a world where behavior and participation are measured and managed within large interconnected networks. These developments are often motivated by practical goals: efficiency, security, and global cooperation. Yet they also raise profound questions about the balance between unity and individual autonomy. If humanity becomes too integrated into centralized systems, the pressure to conform may grow stronger. In such a world, the story of Babel becomes more than an ancient narrative. It becomes a mirror reflecting the tension between collective ambition and personal freedom. The desire to build systems that unify humanity can easily transform into the desire to control humanity. The lesson of Babel does not suggest that cooperation is wrong or that global communication is harmful. Instead, it reminds us that true unity cannot be manufactured through structures of power alone. Systems may organize behavior, but they cannot create genuine moral harmony. Real unity emerges from shared values rather than enforced uniformity. It arises when individuals freely choose truth, humility, and responsibility within their own lives. A civilization built on these inner commitments can cooperate across cultures while still preserving the diversity that protects human freedom. In this sense, the scattered world that emerged after Babel may actually offer a deeper path towards spiritual growth. Instead of seeking identity through massive institutions or collective achievements, individuals are invited to pursue truth within their own conscience and community. The true danger is not diversity, but pride. the belief that humanity can construct a perfect system capable of replacing moral responsibility. Babel stands as a reminder that no tower, no empire, and no technological network can substitute for the inner transformation of the human soul. Ultimately, the deepest form of unity does not arise from a single language, a single government, or a single technological system. It arises from shared spiritual values that transcend cultural and national boundaries. And those values, truth, humility, justice, and compassion, cannot be engineered by a centralized civilization. They must be chosen, one human heart at a time. After exploring the story of Babel, its symbolism, and its relevance to the modern world, a deeply personal question begins to emerge. The narrative is not only about ancient civilizations, technological systems, or political power. Ultimately, it asks something far more intimate, something each person must answer within their own conscience. What kind of life do you want to live? Do you want to belong to a vast system that promises recognition, stability, and influence? Or do you want to live according to a personal conscience before God, even if that path is quieter and less celebrated? Throughout history, large systems have always attracted people with powerful promises. They offer a sense of belonging, they offer protection, identity, and the feeling of being part of something grand. In a unified structure, individuals may feel that their lives contribute to a greater historical movement. This was the appeal of Babel. The people building the tower were not necessarily evil or malicious. Many of them likely believed they were participating in something remarkable. They were constructing a city, building a monument, and creating a legacy that could last for generations. To stand among thousands of workers, all moving toward the same goal, must have created a powerful sense of unity and pride. Yet the deeper danger of such systems is not always visible from the inside. When identity becomes tied to the success of the collective, individuals may slowly surrender their ability to question the direction of the system itself. Loyalty to the structure can begin to outweigh loyalty to truth. This is why the call to choose personal truth becomes so important. The Bible repeatedly emphasizes the value of the individual conscience before God. Each person is responsible for their own choices, their own moral direction, and their own spiritual journey. A life that prioritizes conscience over collective pride may not appear impressive by worldly standards. It may not bring fame, recognition, or political influence. It may even feel small compared to the grand narratives that dominate history. Yet such a life often possesses something far more valuable: depth. A scattered life, one that is not absorbed into massive institutions or ideological movements, can create space for reflection. It allows individuals to develop a relationship with truth that is not dictated by the momentum of a crowd. This kind of life may be quieter, it may be less visible, it may lack the dramatic achievements that large, centralized systems often celebrate, but it can also be freer. Freedom in this sense does not mean the absence of responsibility. Rather, it means the ability to pursue truth without being forced into uniform patterns of thought. It means the ability to question ideas, examine beliefs, and grow spiritually without fear of losing one's place in a powerful system. In a world increasingly driven by digital influence, institutional authority, and global narratives, this freedom becomes even more precious. Many people today feel subtle pressure to conform, to adopt the same opinions, repeat the same language, and align themselves with the same ideological frameworks that dominate public conversation. But the story of Babel reminds us that true wisdom sometimes emerges outside the center of power. It often grows in the quiet spaces where individuals search for truth with humility rather than ambition. Instead of chasing recognition from massive institutions or global systems, people can choose to pursue deeper spiritual foundations. This means seeking truth even when it is unpopular. It means nurturing faith even when it does not bring immediate rewards. And it means allowing conscience to guide one's life rather than collective pride. If this reflection resonates with you, consider continuing this journey of exploration. Conversations about faith, history, and the deeper patterns of human civilization are essential in a world that often moves too quickly to pause and reflect. If you find value in these ideas, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribing and following helps ensure that more thoughtful discussions like this can reach people who are searching for deeper meaning in an increasingly complex world. The story of Babel ultimately reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of unity. The builders of the tower believed that unity could be achieved through structure. If everyone spoke the same language, lived in the same city, and worked toward the same goal, they assumed humanity would become stronger and more stable. In their view, unity required centralization. It required a single project, a single identity, and a single direction. The tower itself symbolized this ambition, a physical representation of humanity's attempt to build its own path to greatness. But the deeper lesson of Babel suggests that such unity is ultimately fragile. Systems built on forced uniformity may appear powerful, yet they often suppress the diversity that allows societies to remain healthy and self-correcting. When everyone is required to think in the same way, creativity weakens. When authority becomes too centralized, accountability disappears. And when collective pride replaces humility, civilizations can lose their ability to recognize their own moral limitations. The confusion of languages at Babel disrupted this fragile system, but it also revealed an alternative vision of human unity. True unity does not come from towers, governments, or technological systems. It does not arise from forcing billions of people into identical structures of thought and behavior. Instead, genuine unity emerges from shared spiritual values. When individuals across cultures and nations commit themselves to truth, justice, compassion, and humility, they create a form of unity that transcends geography and language. People can remain diverse in culture, tradition, and expression while still being connected by deeper moral foundations. This kind of unity is not imposed from above. It grows from within. It is built through countless personal decisions, moments when individuals choose honesty over deception, humility over pride, and faith over fear. These choices may seem small in isolation, yet together they form the invisible fabric that holds civilizations together. In this light, the lesson of Babel becomes surprisingly hopeful. Humanity does not need a taller tower, a larger empire, or a more powerful global system to achieve harmony. What humanity truly needs is a humbler heart. A civilization grounded in humility can cooperate without domination. It can share knowledge without erasing diversity. And it can pursue progress without losing sight of the spiritual dignity of every individual. The dream of Babel sought unity through human power. the deeper path toward unity begins with something far simpler and far more challenging. It begins with the transformation of the human soul.